So let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is a true trailblazer in the industry. She has spent 20 years working for a global bank responsible for data and analytics across the bank. She moved to Ernst & Young 2 years ago and has probably got the coolest job in the industry of being responsible for, and I can't remember this bit, but it's next generation data and advanced analytics. But truly an expert in terms of robotics, AI, and machine learning. So please join me in welcoming on stage Diane Black.
Thank you, Pyle. And it's amazing to see Pyle. So I've known Pyle for, 15 years. I was actually responsible for recruiting Pyle into the said bank that I worked at. And one of the things that I'm really proud of as a leader is when I see some of the women that I've worked with develop, and to see her as chair of this amazing community is absolutely fantastic. So it's great to see that. And it's great to be here. Wow, 450 women and a few men in the room. Hi. It's fantastic to see so much talent, and it's really important that as women we connect and we network and we support each other. So I hope you get the opportunity to do that today. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to start this session off by saying that we're all not going to have a job in 15 years' time. Not quite. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of data, the future of analytics, and the expansion of what is known as artificial intelligence, and how that's going to change not just the way we work as data professionals, but also how it's going to impact on society and the workforce going forward. Does that sound okay? Good, excellent. So, artificial intelligence, it is exploding as an industry. Oh, I've lost my screen. So I think it says something like it's worth about $17 billion, $12.5 billion in 2017. It's estimated to increase to a $47 billion industry by 2020 in 3 years' time, which is pretty a massive increase, exponential increase in how much organizations are going to develop artificial intelligence. So it is exploding as an industry. And the impact of that is up for discussion and debate. There is a lot of research out there in terms of what will actually be the impact of the introduction of artificial intelligence and automation through robotics within the workplace. McKinsey released a report this week, and they talked about the fact that by 2020, this is only kind of 3 years' time, 2030, in 13 years' time, 15% of jobs will have changed. 75 to 375 million jobs will have changed their job category, and 400 to 800 million jobs will have been displaced by automation, and that's within the next 15 years. So that's the most recent research that's come out. And the impact of that on society, the impact of that on the jobs that we all do in this room is going to be very, very impactful. The impact on education, the impact on the skills that we'll all need going forward is something that we need to think about. And then what are the jobs that are going to replace the jobs that have been automated? So what are going to be the new jobs that are created as a result of that? And I think we truly are at the start of a journey that is going to transform how we actually work across the world, which is exciting, but a little bit scary as well. So why has this happened? What has been the kind of cause in terms of what's enabled us to start to use this type of technology? So 3 things, and there's probably more than 3 things, but 3 key things. One is obviously the infrastructure that allows you to store huge quantities of information not necessarily on site within your organisation, but the use of cloud as well. So that's helped us store huge quantities of information. Technology has advanced. Piles talked about big data, and big data is advancing and evolving as we speak. That has also enabled us to store and process huge quantities of information, unimaginable quantities of information. I think there's a zettabyte up there. Someone said that a brontobyte was 10 to the 27th of a byte. You know, we're talking about huge quantities of information, and everyone in this room knows how much value you can get from actually analysing more data and not having to sample. And then also the methods in which we as practitioners use, so our actual the data science, the analytics that we use has also evolved in terms of using different techniques and different approaches. So they're probably the three big things that have enabled the industry to work on this. So what are the principles? What's the difference between, I was recruited as an analyst 22 years ago into a bank, and we took samples of data. It was off a horrible mainframe, and we did some analytics, and we were doing some pretty sophisticated things at that time. It was predictive analytics, it was scorecard development. It was neural networks for fraud as well, so there was some prescriptive analytics being done. But what are the four kind of big areas that have kind of changed and have enabled this advancement in analytics? So the first principle is that it's about reasoning. So it's about drawing conclusions based on known facts, and being able to program that, but also inductive. So the process of drawing a likely conclusion, a predictive conclusion based on facts, and getting the machines to kind of learn from the behaviour that they see. So that's critical. The next one is that the machine will learn. So it will use the past and it will learn from the past and therefore be able to more likely predict the future. So it can use rote learning, which is the trial and error that's used in a lot of artificial intelligence. Or it can use, if we don't know, if we haven't had that outcome within the data, and that can happen to most of us, we can build the rules in there. And then when it does happen, it can again start to learn from that. And that's been a critical piece of this ongoing learning cycle. It needs to be problem solving. So a systematic search across a series of possible actions that can happen as a result of a decision. So that needs to happen ongoing within the background. And then probably could have been on the previous slide as well, one of the advancements that we've had is around being able to use natural language processing across language, not just English, but across language, the ability to be able to process natural language, to be able to know exactly what the machine needs to do next. So they are the kind of four principles that take us from analytics in it, as we all know and love it, but take it kind of up into the next level. And they enable us to be able to create artificial intelligence that allows a computer to learn from the past, to predict the future, and change its activity on an ongoing basis. And that can be programmed into anything. So it can be programmed into the internet itself, and most of the technology companies do that, but it can be also programmed into other things, and I'll touch on one in a minute. We're at a point where AI is actually surpassing a human cognitive performance in a number of different areas. So this is where actually the computer can actually work better than a human brain, which again is kind of quite a scary thought. But this is happening in games. So a computer can play poker with one of the best poker players in the world, and the computer inevitably will win. So we know that we can actually program a computer to think better than the human brain. Facial recognition, another huge step forward. I think Apple also launched their new facial recognition technology this week. The ability to be able to recognize a human face, to be able to, in the next section, the emotional intelligence, to be able to tell whether someone is happy, whether they're lying, which is which is an interesting thing, whether they are, deceiving you, whether they are, emotionally happy. You can actually get a computer to be able to do that. Again, you can think about how that will impact the security industry. You can think about how that could actually impact being able to ID and V individuals in certain financial companies as well. We talked about natural language skills. So a computer can now process natural language far better than a human, especially when you are translating between different languages. And in healthcare, so huge step forwards, particularly in cancer research, using this capability. And again, far better that the computer's predicting which treatment to give to cancer patients than an actual doctor themselves looking at the same information. And lots of examples of using predictive behavioural information around actually predicting future events far better than a human brain. So we're at a point now where it is surpassing what a human can do. It can look a little bit goofy, but the animation is showing something pretty amazing. This is Google's DeepMind AI teaching itself how to walk. So they'd set it up and said, right, you've got 2 legs and you need to put one in front of the other. But what's actually happening in the background is it's actually teaching itself using virtual sensors. So it can kind of looks a little bit goofy. So it's kind of working out, right, do I do it on 4 legs? Is 4 legs better? And it's actually working out through kind of the aid of computing how to actually what's the best way to get from point A to point B. And this is kind of happening a lot. Did everyone see the robot that did the back flip? Yeah, so teaching a robot how to do a backflip is just absolutely kind of incredible. And then eventually it learns actually that is the best way to run on normal terrain. Then it works out how to run on more rough terrain, and then also how to get over obstacles. And this is all being done using AI and machine learning. Doesn't always work, obviously. But again, the best thing about it is that it takes that information and it's learning from that mistake to make sure it doesn't do it over and over again. 3 different models used to work that through. Like I say, it worked out how many legs were actually more efficient. And then also putting obstacles in the way is the other kind of way in which you can kind of get it to learn from itself. Yeah, I might try that one. Brilliant. The tech industry obviously is all in on AI. I don't think I'm kind of preaching to the converted there. Huge investment in artificial intelligence methods, and it always feels like when I present, something will have already happened, and there'll be some other article produced, and something will have evolved. This world is evolving massively, and when you've got the research engines of Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, etc., kind of in the background developing techniques and different ways to approach this, we know that this is going to evolve quickly and is going to get better and better. So all of them are in. And it is already, it's all around us. And we know this, we see it every day. We know that Facebook is using artificial intelligence to stream what we see when we look at our feed. We know that Amazon is doing this to promote their recommendations, and Netflix as well. We know that even the map that's on the Apple iPhone is using the speed of traffic to learn in terms of how long it's telling you to get from a destination to a certain destination. So it is happening right in front of our eyes. And it can go a little bit wrong as well. So it's not perfect, yeah? My parents used my email address a couple of weeks ago to get some travel insurance. And it was for over 65s, yeah? So for the last 2 weeks, I've had that many offers on pensions and things, and of that age category, and what do you do with your retirement money? And I'm like, where's that come from? But I know it's come from the fact that My parents used my email address, and that email was sent to me, and Google have used that data, and now I'm suddenly getting lots of offers around things that are not relevant to me. So it's happening, but it also isn't perfect, and it can get better and better, and I'm sure it will get better and better. I'm sure the people in this room for your organisations will be working on how to improve your data and analytics going forward. Does anyone know what this is? Any mums in the room who've got a small child? And have you seen this? So this is the must-have Christmas present for 2017. It is a doll, but it is a doll with artificial intelligence built into it. And I'm not advertising buying it, but I kind of find it fascinating. So this doll will learn your child's voice, and it will learn what your child talks to it about, and it will therefore be able to communicate more with your child on the things that your child wants to communicate with. So AI is there, and it's even embedded in a doll. I think Barbie have also released a doll with artificial intelligence, but this is happening, and this isn't particularly that expensive either. Not that I'm promoting you all go out and buy one, but I've got one just so I can actually see how far is it actually taking the actual intelligence itself. But that's the must-buy present for Christmas. So it's happening. The area I work in for EY is in financial services, and I'll talk about some areas in which the financial service organisations are using AI and robotics in a bit, but it's fair to say, similarly to the technology companies, that financial service organisations are taking this very seriously and making significant amount of investment. They see it as key to their strategy, which is really exciting, because it puts data and analytics right in the heart of what the banks are doing, and also probably right in the heart of what a lot of industries are actually doing. It's a very exciting times for people working within financial services. And to give you an idea of how it can transform the banking sector, an Indonesian bank, DBS, that's up there, they, from scratch, launched a mobile bank using voice biometrics to do the identification and verification process. So they introduced biometrics to do that. They introduced 24/7 customer service using chatbots and robots in the background to automate the application processing and actually automate the servicing of the account as well. And they put artificial intelligence in terms of their security on how they were going to ensure that the product and the funding was actually kept secure. They launched that mobile bank in record speed. Yes, it went from nothing to be able to getting customers on board, recruited, serviced, etc., and completely started to change the industry with Indonesia. That the launch of that product actually caused a huge increase in the use of the internet itself in Indonesia. So you can kind of see how they are working on transforming how they're actually doing business. And the other banks as well, bringing artificial intelligence into how they're servicing their customers, how they're processing their data, and how they're actually automating a lot of the work that would have normally been manual. So kind of really driving out cost efficiencies. And that's kind of happening right now with the banking sector. And it's also happening within my own area as well in professional services. So obviously big part of EY in the Big Four is our audit function or assurance function. And we've started to introduce robots into that process and artificial intelligence to actually read all of the documentation that's required to actually do an audit. So to give you an idea, we would see, literally thousands of documents in order to audit a large company. And they would normally have to have been read by a human being who would go through it, would pull out the pertinent parts, we would then kind of collate that information and then go through that in terms of whether we could assure that the company was performing in line with expectations. That's now being done by robots. So a robot farm that can work 24/7, doesn't have to go home and have its tea, can keep reading through the night, and pull out them pertinent parts so that a human being can actually look at that. But a lot of the hard work is actually being done by robotics and then artificial intelligence on top of that to actually learn not just about the assurance of that one organisation, but learn across the different organisations. So you can actually take that learning and put it industry-wide, which has been fantastic. And you can imagine how much cost that's actually taken out. So that's just some examples of what's happening within the banks. These are some of the things that we've been working on with the financial service sector in particular. And I think it's fair to say that some of the problems are still the same. So it's not that the business has suddenly got more complex problems or issues. Their problems are probably what you are dealing with, all of you, on a day-to-day basis. How do we improve efficiency? How do we drive revenue? How do we reduce risk? And the problems around how do we stop attrition? How do we make sure we don't reduce our fraud? All of these issues are still the problems that the financial service sector face. But what we've been able to do is use advanced analytics, AI, and robotics to help deliver a better outcome to that business problem, with some pretty dramatic results, both in terms of efficiency, but also in terms of driving revenue and reducing risk in pretty kind of complex areas. I don't intend to go through all of these examples. I think the fraud ones are where we see a lot of intelligence being used and automated, mainly because you need to stay ahead of a very, very complicated environment with fraud. So fraud is now an industry with huge criminal rings. It's global. It's pretty much every single second of every single day they'll be trying to penetrate your technology. So to be able to process huge quantities of information, huge quantities of external information with your information, and be able to put intelligence over the top of it is really changing the game in terms of how we kind of combat fraud and security. The other interesting, I find interesting because I'm a bit of a nerd. The other interesting things are where we're seeing industries collide, yeah? So where we're actually seeing the sharing of data supporting two different industries that are kind of separate. And the motor industry is a really good example of this. This is not in the UK, this is global, but the situation where you have the information now being captured in the car, in the computer in the car, which will tell you how someone's driving, what speeds they're going, where they're going as well in terms of geolocation. And we obviously know what's happening with the move towards automated cars. But that's also information that the insurance industry can use as well. So that information is absolutely invaluable to the car insurance industry. So we're seeing the information that's being captured in the car both benefiting the automation of cars, which is coming, as we know, also the safety of cars, so the ability to make sure that they understand when a crash happens, how to make that car safer going forward, and that has had a massive impact on accident rates across the world. But also, how do companies insure people appropriately at the right price and use that information on their pricing as well? So I think there's a lot of examples. There's a lot of ways of doing this as well. So we don't sit with clients and talk to them about, right, you need to completely replace your technology stack. You need to put all these new fancy tools in, etc. But actually, you can use some of these techniques with your own technology stack and potentially leveraging more of the information that you've got. So a lot of the time, we actually work with the client on what have you currently got and how do we actually continue to improve that and use some of these new techniques as well. Okay. And I think it's fair to say that even though most businesses say that AI will enable them to have a competitive advantage, a lot less are actually in the process of doing that. So this is a an evolution. This is a change that the industry are making. So 84% of businesses saying that AI now will enable them to get a competitive advantage, but only 23% have actually incorporated elements of it in their service offerings. And there are very few organisations that have done this kind of right across the board. It tends to be within certain areas, certain departments. So a huge opportunity to unlock benefits for the future. And then to end on a couple of quotes, and I think this one really does kind of link into what will happen to the work that we all do. Within some of the reports, it will be the work that can be automated. It will be the work that a robot can do. But what do industry have to do then? What jobs replace the robot? So if in your bank system, Deutsche Bank, if the people are behaving like robots doing mechanical things, tomorrow we're going to have robots behaving like people, then what do the people do within them organisations? And I think a lot of energy is going on what is going to happen. And not just what work will be replaced, but what skills do we all need? We all need to evolve and learn. But also what impact is that going to have on kind of wider society? So that's going to be really important. And I think we've got a session later on that's going to talk about some of the new skills that we need going forward. And then finally, a lot of what I talked about in terms of, it's been a lot of prediction, using current data and predicting where we think what's going to happen over 15 years time period. We've been, as this is a quote from Bill Gates, very good at working, overestimating what will happen in the next 2 years, but underestimating what will happen in the next 10 years. So a lot of uncertainty in terms of what will happen, a lot of predictions, that some which may be right, some which may be wrong. But I think the main thing is that this is happening and that inaction is not an option. So sitting back and saying, right, it's not going to affect me, it's not going to affect my job, it's not going to affect the way my company works, is not an option. And that's a challenge for all of us. How do we stay ahead of the game, this ever-changing game that's happening? How do we stay connected with an industry that is changing dramatically? And how do we keep relevant? And how do we ensure that our industry stays relevant? So I'd like to leave that with you. Inaction is not an option. And what are you going to do differently going forward? Thank you very much.
So Di, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. So when you talk about robotics, AI, machine learning, it all sounds quite expensive. So what happens if someone's working in an organization where we just simply don't have the technology? What's the advice that you give to organizations? Say, how do you get started on that journey?
Yeah, and it's a really important one, especially for some smaller organizations. I think most of the large organisations have pretty much bought everything, so that doesn't necessarily become an issue. So from an advice perspective, one is actually looking at what you've currently got, yeah, because a lot of this, these new learnings, it's about just doing things in slightly different ways. So it's not necessarily a technology play. There's also the open source community. You've got a bunch of people going off and learning R. The open source technology is obviously, a much better option in terms of if funding is a constraint. So yeah, look at what you've got now. Look at whether sometimes organisations have bought like these add-on modules and are not using them, but also look at in terms of whether there's any open source options as well.
Thank you, Di.
That's all right.
And so Di's going to be with us for the whole day.
Yes.
So please find Di during the break, ask her your questions. So yeah, thank you very much, Di.
Pleasure. Thank you.